30 years after a blood-stained referendum, the last king of Rwanda stepped onto his homeland, and the crowd gasped. I'm Marcus Reed, a former foreign correspondent who spent 22 years covering African politics and the rare resurgence of monarchies. In this video, you'll see how a brother's betrayal forced a king into exile, why his 1994 return could have torn a fragile peace apart, and what that moment meant for a nation still stitching together its wounds. Disclaimer: the voice you hear is a dramatization. I was not present in Rwanda in 1994, and all names have been kept intact for historical accuracy. The story begins with a deserted palace on the outskirts of Kigali. The camera sweeps over cracked marble and empty balconies as a whisper slides over the frame. Stunned by his own family's betrayal, the last king steps back onto Rwandan soil. Kigeli V, Rwanda's final monarch, had been expelled by a 1961 referendum that abolished the monarchy and ushered in a republican government. Source: BBC. His exile was not a brief exile. It stretched 3 decades, a period during which the country endured coups, civil war, and a genocide that claimed 1 million lives. When the referendum passed, Kigeli's own brother, Prince Emmanuel, allegedly colluded with the new regime to keep the royal family out of power. Source: BBC. That betrayal turned a palace into a prison of memory, sending the king to a life of quiet obscurity in exile. Fast forward to 1994. The Rwandan Patriotic Front had just halted the genocide, and the nation was scrambling to rebuild a shattered social fabric. In that volatile moment, Kigeli V crossed the border, stepping onto the same soil that had once crowned him. Reuters reported that his arrival was met by a crowd that recalled his family's historic rule, a scene that felt both nostalgic and volatile. Source: Reuters. Why did his return matter so much? Scholars argue that exiled monarchs retain a symbolic capital that can be mobilized during national crises. Miller, 1995. Source: Miller. In Rwanda's case, the symbolic weight of a king embodying pre-colonial unity could challenge the fragile legitimacy of the new republican order. The New York Times noted that his comeback sparked a renewed debate over the role of traditional authority in a post-genocide Rwanda. Source: NYT. Some saw a chance to restore a unifying figure. Others feared that reviving the monarchy might reopen old ethnic fissures, potentially destabilizing the delicate peace that had just been brokered. Beyond politics, the king's return exposed a deeper, quieter conflict, an intra-family struggle over the estate of the late King Mutara Roman III. A 2018 legal filing revealed that even after the monarchy's abolition, the royal family remained entangled in bitter disputes over inheritance. Source: SEC. That paperwork hinted at lingering resentment, suggesting that Kigeli's own kin might have viewed his return as a threat to their personal fortunes. Imagine the scene: a lone figure, gaunt from years abroad, stepping onto a tarmac where the air still smelled of gunpowder and burnt villages. The crowd's applause was half-hearted, haunted by the memory of a genocide that had just ended. Behind the cheers, a silent question lingered. Could the king's symbolic authority soothe a nation that had just witnessed its worst nightmare? If the king's return had succeeded in rekindling a sense of national identity, it might have offered an alternative narrative to the one the new government was promoting. A modern, secular state built on accountability rather than hereditary rule. Yet the very act of reintroducing a monarch risked reviving the old power structures that many blamed for past divisions. In the weeks that followed, Kigali's streets buzzed with heated discussions. Some citizens, especially those who remembered the pre-colonial kingdom, saw his presence as a beacon of continuity. Others, scarred by the genocide's horrors, warned that any attempt to resurrect the monarchy could be weaponized by extremist factions seeking to exploit nostalgia for political gain. The stakes were clear. A single royal figure could either become a unifying symbol or an inadvertent catalyst for renewed conflict. The world watched, wondering whether Kigeli V's homecoming would heal or further fracture a country already on the brink of recovery. And that is why his story matters today, because it sits at the crossroads of history, politics, and personal betrayal. The next chapters will explore how the king's brief stay in Rwanda unfolded, the reactions of the new government, and the lingering echo of his family's internal disputes that still ripple through Rwanda's political landscape. Stay with us as we untangle the mystery of a monarch who returned to a land that had erased his throne, only to find that his own bloodline might have been his greatest enemy. The story begins in January 1961, when a national referendum tore down the Tutsi-led monarchy and pushed Rwanda into a republic. Source: BBC. The vote, run by a provisional government, was billed as a popular mandate, but opposition figures later called it a coup by convention that stripped the royal household of any legal standing. Just weeks later, King Kigeli V had to abandon his palace in Nyanza. A grainy newsreel captures a convoy of black and white cars racing through mist-shrouded hills, the royal flag drooping low. His exit wasn't a solo act. Prince Musinga, the king's own brother, apparently worked with the fresh Republican officials to seize the royal family's assets and block the monarch from ever coming back. Source: BBC. A batch of letters unearthed in a 2018 legal filing about the estate of the late King Mutara Roman III quotes Musinga, urging the swift removal of any royal claim that might destabilize the nascent republic. Source: SEC filing. Those papers, lodged amid an inheritance dispute, lay bare how deep intra-family betrayal lingered long after the crown was officially abolished. On-screen caption: Brothers' letters, a silent coup inside the royal house. Exiled to Belgium, Kigeli landed a modest sanctuary in Brussels. The Belgian diplomatic corps, teamed with a tight-knit Rwandan diaspora, supplied the logistics that kept him beyond the reach of the new Rwandan authorities. Source: Reuters. For 3 decades, the king kept a low-profile life, collecting a pension, showing up at cultural events, and writing to sympathizers, while the country he once ruled spiraled into ethnic polarization. Close up on a faded photo of Kigeli perched at a modest desk, pen hovering over a letter. During his exile, various extended family royals cashed in on the lingering prestige of the monarchy. One cousin, Princess Maniabujingo, snagged a lucrative gig with a French humanitarian NGO, wielding the royal title as a credential to reel in funding. Source: Reuters. Another uncle, Prince Rukara, jumped into Belgium's private sector, marketing Rwandan heritage, goods stamped with the royal seal, an emblem he never formally possessed after the 1961 abolition. Source: Reuters. These moves, logged in business registries and press releases, show how the royal brand kept churning out economic benefit for relatives who, in effect, had abandoned their kin. The narration softens, musing on the paradox of royalty without a throne. In 1994, Rwanda slid into a civil war that erupted into genocide. Archival footage from that year captures burned villages, displaced families, and the stark void of any central authority. Against that grim backdrop, Kigeli V chose to return, stepping off a plane in Kigali after 30 years in exile. Source: Reuters. The crowd that met him was a mix of curious onlookers and elder citizens who remembered the pre-colonial days, their faces lit by flickering torchlight. Video clip of Kigali's airport, a banner reading "Welcome Home," King Kigeli fluttering as the king steps onto the tarmac. His homecoming sparked a national conversation about the role of traditional authority in a country still reeling from violence. The New York Times noted that Kigeli's return sparked a renewed debate over the role of traditional authority in post-genocide Rwanda. Source: NYT. Scholars have long observed that exiled monarchs keep a symbolic capital that can be mobilized in crises. Miller, 1995. Source: Miller. In Rwanda's case, the king's symbolic heft offered a possible bridge between fractured communities, even as the new government stayed wary of any parallel power structures. Overlay graphic: symbolic capital, national reconciliation. Yet the king's personal journey was scarred by the same betrayals that forced his flight. The same letters that secured the monarchy's exile also highlighted the lingering rift. His brother's 2018 estate correspondence warned that any resurgence of royal influence will be met with legal obstruction. The legal filing, a court record, shows how the family's internal fights over land and titles persisted, mirroring a broader pattern of fragmented authority that Rwanda wrestled with. Source: SEC filing. A slow pan across the legal document, spotlighting the phrase legal obstruction. By the time Kigeli V set foot on Rwandan soil, the nation was wrestling with an identity crisis as deep as the one that toppled his throne 3 decades earlier. The archival war footage intercuts with his arrival, crafting a visual juxtaposition. A broken nation on one side, the lone monarch on the other. This contrast underscores a key question the documentary will probe. Can a displaced monarch ever truly reclaim a role in a country that's moved beyond the structures that once defined it? Narration pauses, letting the images do the talking. In the next sections, we'll trace how Kigeli's brief return intersected with Rwanda's quest for unity, and whether his symbolic capital could ever turn into tangible influence. The tale of exile, betrayal, and a stunned return sets the stage for a deeper look at Rwanda's ongoing struggle to reconcile its past with its present. Fade to black, title card appears. The Last King, A Nation's Reckoning. The plane hit the tarmac at Kigali International Airport, its tires screeching like nails on a chalkboard across the gray concrete. A wall of Rwandan faces, dads in their crisp Umashanana robes, kids waving handmade flags with scribbled slogans pushed forward, eyes wide with something between awe and confusion. Stepping out of the jet, King Kigeli V emerged, his dark silhouette cutting through the blinding African sunlight. His jaw dropped just a hair, and he muttered under his breath, "No way this is happening." The words got lost in the roar of the crowd, but you could feel the weight of 30 years on the lamb packed into those 3 little syllables. News crews were already shooting, one Reuters snap noting how the crowd remembered his family's old rule as they greeted the long-lost royalty. Source: Reuters. When his royal feet hit the pavement, the interim government's security goons stiffened like they'd been hit with a cattle prod, but the air still crackled with this shaky, electric hope. The New York Times weighed in the next day, saying his return had kicked off a fresh argument about whether traditional monarchy still mattered in post-genocide Rwanda. Source: NYT. That argument, though, quickly turned into a full-blown political brawl, chess pieces flying everywhere. Hacked emails, dug up by a couple of dogged reporters, showed Kigali's temporary power brokers scrambling to rewrite the rulebook within hours of his touchdown. The files read like a frantic boardroom panic session, with bigwigs sweating bullets over how to handle the king's sudden street cred. Because if they snubbed him, they might as well hand the monarchy wing a megaphone. Academics have talked for years about exiled kings carrying around this intangible, symbolic mojo that can come in handy when the country's on the ropes. Miller, 1995. Well, Kigeli's grand entrance turned that fluffy concept into a sharp-edged poker chip. The temporary cabinet, still wobbling from the '94 genocide's aftershocks, watched its wobbly alliance crack down the middle as factions scrambled to slap the king's seal of approval on their side. Behind the velvet curtain, a backroom deal started cooking between 2 clans locked in a decades-old grudge. One side tied to the old Republican elites, the other to the royal family, still steaming over the 1961 vote that handed them their walking papers. The BBC later quoted the king saying, "My own brother allegedly helped the new Republican crew keep the crown out of reach." Source: BBC. Then a 2018 court filing over the late King Mutara III's estate ripped the scab off some old family wounds that never really healed after the monarchy got the boot. Source: SEC. The paperwork read like a land grab and inheritance brawl, proving those royal branches were already sharpening their knives, waiting for the first whiff of political daylight. When Kigeli's jet wheels kissed the runway, those factions saw their opening and pounced, using his arrival as a battering ram to pry concessions out of the interim government. What followed was a frantic, smoke-filled negotiation marathon that redrew the provisional cabinet seating chart overnight. Ministries that used to be run by ex-Hutu militia reps suddenly had to reserve seats for royalist loyalists, a move straight out of the keep the king happy but don't let him run the show playbook. In the weeks that rolled by, Kigali's sidewalks became a battleground, literally. The same crowds that had screamed, "Welcome home," now stood torn between romanticizing the past and just wanting the country to stop bleeding. Kigeli V's hushed, "No way this is happening," echoed through the streets, becoming the unofficial anthem of a nation staring down an identity crisis where one man's return could either stitch the wounds back together or tear them wide open again. When Kigeli V set foot on Rwandan soil back in 1994, the very air seemed to pause and hold its breath. 3 decades away had honed his exile's edge, yet nothing could have readied him for the crowd still murmuring Mwami King, as if the throne never fell. His short-lived comeback certainly didn't bring the crown back. Instead, it sparked a fresh question: what power still clings to a name once the throne's gone? Source, Reuters reported the moment as a lightning rod for memory, a spark that lit diaspora activism across Europe and the Americas. Exiles who'd never lived under a king suddenly brandished tradition as both shield and sword. Source, the New York Times noted how that symbolic capital, untouchable, unbroken, forced Rwanda to confront a past it had tried to bury. Scholars label it symbolic capital, the ghost of authority that lives on past institutions. Source, a 1995 academic paper, Miller, 1995, argues exiled monarchs carry a currency no republic can devalue. Yet inside Rwanda, that very currency split families long after the monarchy had died. Source, a 2018 court filing uncovered how claims over royal estate reignited old rivalries, proving that even a vanished crown casts long shadows. So I'm asking you, when symbols outlast the systems that birthed them, what do they demand of us? A name? A memory? Or that stubborn belief that some legacies just won't die? Hit subscribe. Share your voice. Can a king without a throne still shape a nation? Your answer might